having your car stolen and then going out and seeing it drive around. Now, you can't leave me hanging here. So what did you do after that? Like, how did you end up finding it? Did you end up confronting the guy? What happened with it?
So he's out there joyriding, of course, and I'm in my nightmares imagining him treating this car, chopping this car up, putting regular unleaded gas in it, all the sins that you do.
Right.
And I see the car, and I want nothing more than to jump the curb and go immediately speed after it and run every red light and slice through traffic. But I'm in a Lexus GX 470. I could maybe jump the curb, but I'm not slicing through traffic very much. Mm-hmm. And he was already had a head start. So almost as quick as I saw him, I lost him. And it was devastating. It was almost more difficult than if I never saw it at all, right?
Wow.
Because it was right there at my fingertips, and then he got away.
From Olympic City and the home of Pikes Peak, this is the Automotive ADHD Show with Matt West.
And here we are, rocking it on the Automotive ADHD Show. Matt West here, hanging out with you, talking cars on the weekend. Loaded show for you. It has been an incredibly busy week, and we're going to talk about how the EPA has now approved California's gas car ban. Yeah, they did that. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to why that's a terrible idea, and also talk about why I don't think that's going to work. So we're going to discuss that. Also, we dodged a bullet here in Colorado with a proposed K-truck ban. And I mean, we just narrowly dodged that bullet. So we're going to discuss that. And one Skyline GTR owner is making news headlines, not only for having his car stolen, but more importantly, the way he got it back. It's a little different than you would expect. And there is a happy ending to it. Now, he is actually going to join me as a guest in the second half of the show, so you don't want to miss that. Stay tuned. It's going to be right here. Of course, this is the Automotive ADHD Show, heard around the state of Colorado on the radio. Several great radio stations to catch it on, but also online, YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, Rumble, and more. Now, I will say I am very glad to be back in the chair this week hosting the show, but Jim Miller last week did a tremendous job keeping the seat warm for me while I was out east. I was doing some work for my day job in Washington, D.C. Those pesky day jobs, by the way. I know, I just want to sit here and talk about cars and maybe even wrench on some cars, but the cars don't pay for themselves either. So, and it was fun. It was fun. So, but Jim did a really good job. I mean, I'll put it this way, too. The radio station didn't burn down. I didn't get fired. The station has no new fines from the FCC that I know of, at least. So I think all of that is a win right there. I didn't really know what to. I didn't know what he was going to talk about. So I didn't even hear the show until afterwards as a podcast on the airplane back from DC. So and I think Jim did a really good job. And I even hear that he might have talked about Toyota. That's very surprising. Very, very surprising indeed. So, and a big thanks to James Fiddler for producing the show last week. I tend to run things solo, but James jumped in and did all the technical stuff and helped Jim out with that last week. So don't miss that show. If you did miss it, go check it out. Jim's first show solo. It's a ton of fun. I think he did a nice job. Go give it a listen on the podcast. So now, typically, I like to keep things kind of light and fun, especially here at the beginning of the show. But we've got so much stuff to get to. I have to just go straight into this K-truck topic because we really, really very narrowly had a K-truck ban just go into effect in the night. That, by the way, I'll point out, no one voted for. Just was going to happen, and no one was going to notice. The good news is somebody noticed, and some people started raising hell about it, and the state has walked back on it. And this is actually such recent news, at least, that I was planning I did some of my show prep, getting some stories last night, and I actually was planning to talk about the ban that is going into effect and how we need to get up in arms, figuratively speaking, and do something about this and let our state legislators know, let the DMV know. That already happened. You, the listener, the good folks of the state of Colorado beat me to it. I was going to do this whole thing about how we got to defend against this. And nope, as it comes down late yesterday, another story that this is now been, the ban has now been canned, at least for now. At least for now. And to get you up to speed, if you're thinking that, well, why are we banning, what do we have against Chrysler K platform vehicles from the 80s? Are we banning those now? Why? No, we're talking about a different K vehicle. It's a vehicle classification from Japan, KEI, K-Jidosha is the official name for it. And these are mini trucks and mini cars. Undoubtedly, you've seen these things cruising around. And they are smaller vehicles for use in Japan that have a smaller engine displacement. Typically, the limit is 660 cc's. So they're basically motorcycle engines inside these cars. And that's done because Japan taxes vehicles based off of engine displacement. And obviously, having the smallest displacement possible while still having a usable, functional automobile is beneficial from a tax perspective in Japan. Also, these K vehicles are usually fairly cheap to get into. They're not typically expensive, and they are well-loved in Japan. And they work great on the much smaller roads out there, too. You don't necessarily need a big lumbering vehicle out there in Japan. So the thing is, and you might say, well, this might be a niche thing. I don't think K vehicles are a niche thing so much anymore. I'm seeing these things constantly cruising around here in Colorado. They're all over the country. People love them. Now, in order to import one, it has to be more than 25 years old. And that's a rule which I personally wish we didn't have, but that's presumably a rule to protect sales of new vehicles and new domestically made vehicles here in the United States. Now, with these K vehicles, though, the ban on these, the hatred for them seems to be incredibly one-sided. Everyone who owns them loves them. Everyone who just sees them on the road probably is like, that's a weird miniature car. And then they go about their day. No one goes, yeah, that dude having fun driving his mini truck, he needs to not do that. I don't like that he's having that much fun. No, I don't think anyone's doing that. But the group responsible for this, here's where it gets crazy. The group responsible isn't even a elected body. It's not even a governmental organization. Talk about bureaucratic overreach of unelected officials. And these people aren't even officials. This comes by way of the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, the AAMVA. And now the AAMVA is not the government. They are not run by the government, but they issue recommendations to DMVs all across the country. And for some reason, I have yet to figure out why. I have theories, but I don't know for certain. But for some reason, DMVs listen to them, even though they're not a government organization in any way, shape, or form. And here's what's crazy about it. So they issued a recommendation to the Colorado DMV saying, and specifically singling out, they list K vehicles or mini trucks in this recommendation, saying K vehicles and mini trucks do not meet the definition of motor vehicle in section 42-6-102 because they were not designed primarily for travel on the public highway and are not generally and commonly used to transport persons and property over public highways in the United States. They say these vehicles are light, often right-hand drive vehicles with smaller bodies and engine displacements that were designed for foreign roads. The manufacturing standards for these vehicles differ significantly from North American vehicle safety standards. You could say, oh, all right, they're not as safe as modern cars. They're not as safe as American cars in general. I don't know if I necessarily buy that. And that's for one reason. This is two reasons, actually. First of all, you take a 25-year-old K truck and you say, that doesn't meet modern safety standards. I have news. A 25-year-old Toyota Camry sold for the United States market also doesn't meet modern standards because it's not a modern car. But also, twofold, to say in general that these don't meet safety standards in general is, I think, completely missing the point that motorcycles exist. I am a motorcycle rider, but if I was more of a motorcycle enthusiast, if that was my main thing, if this was motorcycle ADHD, I would be kind of offended by that, I think, because A K vehicle is going to be a lot safer than a motorcycle. You still have the protection. A lot of these things have airbags, seat belts, and all of that. Those are things you don't have on a motorcycle. You don't have those at all. So the fact that, well, they're not as safe as modern vehicles. They're not safe as vehicles in general. Well, neither are motorcycles. So why isn't the AAMVA coming after motorcycles, by the way? I looked up this definition, this statute here. Motor vehicle means any self-propelled vehicle that is designed primarily for travel, they say, on public highways, and is generally and commonly used to transport persons and property over public highways, including autocycles, trailers, semi-trailers, trailer coaches, without motive power. Motor vehicle, that's how they define that. And to say that, well, K vehicles aren't common and they're not used to transport persons or property. Well, what are you transporting with it when you're driving? Not only that, they do drive on the highway. Anyway, the good news is this has been shot down. I can't say this enough. If this comes back up again, I think it's going to rear its head. We got to be on the lookout. If this comes to your state, be vigilant. Speak out. We'll be right back.
You're looking at a 187-ton log train, and we're about to pull it with our tough new Chevy Cheyenne. It's a 3/4-ton pickup like this, with full-time four-wheel drive and standard 350 V8 engine, equipped with options you can order through any Chevrolet dealer. We've also added auxiliary rear springs because we're overloading far beyond normal capacity. Watch. They're moving. Our 3/4-ton Chevy Cheyenne is actually pulling 187 tons on this level road. Obviously, we don't recommend you abuse your truck like this, but we do want to show you in a dramatic way how tough we build our Chevy trucks. Chevy Cheyenne. It never forgets it's a tough truck.
Objection. The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, the California Democrats are at it again, doubling down on radical green agenda and threatening personal freedom. A state-funded study has suggested a ban now on gas-powered classic cars from public roads, claiming they're too harmful to the environment. We're talking parade cars. We're talking hobby cars, the stuff people enjoy, the stuff that politicians like to ride in parades in when they're running for re-election. Let's be clear. Classic cars are a lot more than just vehicles. They're pieces of our history, symbols of culture, and a source of pride for countless Californians. It doesn't stop there. These same people trying to do these bans, whose green policies could hike gas prices by as much as 85 cents, 90 cents a gallon, they want to force you into an electric vehicle while our power grid can't even handle a summer heat wave. Meanwhile, the elites pushing these bans are still flying in private jets off to meetups and overseas and cruising on their big yachts, which spew far more emissions than the classic cars they want to outlaw. It's not about saving the planet, it's about control. We need to call out this hypocrisy and stand up for the freedoms of individuals, for their automobiles, for what have you. So I can speak for a lot of them knowing that you will pry my 68 Mustang gear shift out of my cold, dead fingers. I yield back.
Drop the mic. That's it. It cannot be said better than that. That was Representative Doug LaMalfa from California saying that hands off our classic cars. Out of my cold, dead hands, he says. And I think that it's about time people start saying that. It's about time that we do that. And there is, I know this is kind of a heavy topic show today. I know. I'm gone for a week and this stuff happens and I got to talk about it. So, but California has just, or rather the EPA has just approved California's plan to ban the sale of new gas and hybrid vehicles by 2035. 10 years out. 10 years. Let that sink in for a second. Only 10 years. And here's the thing. They're also, in a way, they are absolutely coming for classic cars, too. Now, if you look this up, people will go, oh, fact check. They didn't actually say anything about classic cars. Yeah, they didn't say anything about classic cars. That's not how they're acting, because The California Air Resource Board recently started doing surveys of classic car owners to determine how much they drive their cars, how long their cars sit, how many miles on average are they putting on there. They're looking at a number of factors of the different types of these cars, the ranges of years for these cars. Why does the California Air Resource Board care about that? Why? These cars are already exempt, aren't they? The current law says they're exempt for emissions reasons, even in California. Cars, I believe it goes back to cars before 1978. And so if they're already exempt, then why are you asking these questions? Why does it matter? And that's the point that Representative LaMalfa was saying there. And that's the point. He said, you're not coming for the classic cars. You're not going to do it. Now, he said that about a month ago. And now that was before California, or the EPA has approved California's plan now to ban these, gas vehicles, these dastardly, treacherous gas vehicles. He goes on, by the way, in a statement just the other day, the representative said this, by the way, quote, the Biden-Harris EPA has done exactly what they promised they wouldn't, telling Americans what kind of cars we can drive. By approving California's plan to ban the sale of new gas and hybrid vehicles by 2035, they've pushed an agenda that will not only hurt consumers. This policy isn't just bad for Californians. It will raise costs and limit choices for families across the country. It is yet another example of Democrats forcing their radical agenda on the American people, all while undermining our energy independence and national security. So he further elaborates on that, but I won't go into the whole thing. He elaborates on, being diverse and having our energy sources, consumer choice, of course, as well. And he talks, too, about, the power grid being insufficient to handle the influx of electric vehicles. And in that case, it can be. It very much can have that issue. And so I want to pull this up here now a little bit, talking about what exactly has the EPA done? What exactly has they done? What has they done? That's great English there. I talk for a living. What have they done, in terms of approving this? And what they've said is that they gave the green light, essentially, for two major clean air rules. That's how this breaks down, clean air rules, quote unquote. And one, they say, phases out sales of new gasoline-powered vehicles, and the other sets stricter emission standards for heavy trucks. So they're already pretty darn strict, by the way. Diesel emission stuff is nuts. I mean, get a diesel guy talking about how much he hates, EGR valves and, DPFs and all of these things. Also, look at companies like Scania, the truck company in Europe, where they have diesel engines that meet and actually exceed North American emission standards without the use of EGRs and DPFs. Interesting how that works. Interesting. You don't even need those. Edison Motors is using Scania motors now, by the way, so for their vehicles. So this to me is a big problem because, look, you might be saying, and you might be sitting there, and you might be in Colorado where I'm doing this show on the radio, or you might be listening on the podcast online, and you might be in, I don't know, any state. Pick any of the 50 that is in California. So any, I guess, of the remaining 49. And you might say, well, how does this affect me? What is the implication here? It's just California. They're just going to be banned in California, right? No, wrong. Because auto manufacturers don't want to make multiple types of vehicles for different states. Look at it right now. You can buy any new car and you can take it to California and it'll be fine. Why? Because it meets California emissions requirements. They don't want to build here's a California version, here's a Connecticut version, here's a Colorado version, here's a Texas version of that same car. And the reason for that is because it costs money to build those different versions, to design those different versions, and then implement that in the manufacturing process and keep track of all of that. That takes a lot of time, resources, and effort, and manufacturers aren't going to do it. Not only that, the California Air Resource Board, CARB, as they're known, it sets rules and it sets, it creates these regulations in California, which again, is CARB itself a legislating body? I don't think so. But they've been delegated the authority by the government to make these rules and to make these laws. Now that's a whole nother debate there. It's a whole nother debate. And so the thing is, CARB, sets some standards. And they say, this is what we want. And then other states adopt those CARB standards. For what reason? I don't know politically what reason that might have. And a great example here. So if you're saying, well, this is California, it doesn't affect me in Wyoming. It doesn't affect me in other places. Same thing applies, right? You have different car manufacturers, even if it was just California, car manufacturers would likely all try to conform to that one state's regulations to not make multiple vehicles. Either that or what? What's the alternative? Pull out of California completely. So that represents a huge portion of your vehicle sales. Massive portion. Yeah, you got 49 other states, but man, that's a big hit to your bottom line if you lose an entire state of revenue for your car company. That's a problem. So the car companies don't just want to pull out, but look at it this way. Here in Colorado, we're not California. We're getting there. We're definitely getting closer to California. But CARB regulations have been adopted, and I'm going to list the number of states they've been adopted in, because it's not just California. It's California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, deep breath, New York, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Vermont, Virginia, Washington State, and then, Washington, D.C. Not exactly a state in itself, but still, nonetheless, they've also adopted it there. So technically, what is that? 17 other states other than California, and then Washington, D.C. Okay, so that means that if CARB regulations say that there can be no gas cars whatsoever by 2035, if that's what they're saying, then not only does an auto manufacturer who says, well, we need to weigh it, do we want to make cars for the other 50 states, or do we want to pull out of California, or do we want to conform to California? What do we want to do as a business decision? They then have to look at this and say, oh, well, if California and CARB implements these rules, that includes 17 other states, which has a much greater influence on what a car manufacturer is going to do. And we've seen this now with EVs. I've said it before on the show. I'm not anti-EV. I am not anti-EV at all. I like golf carts and all sorts of varieties, obviously. I say that tongue firmly planted in cheek. But no, I like them. There's a benefit to them. And I even heard recently some very sad news that friend of the show, mechanic, the show's official mechanic, dare I say, Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's turned to the dark side. He bought a Volvo C40. Yeah, I think it's a C40. It's an EV, all electric. He's moved on to the dark side. We've lost Brian. I don't know what we're going to do now. I'm just kidding. I think I'm going to have him on the show to explain himself properly. Maybe atone for his mistakes in buying an EV. But no, really, I don't dislike EVs. Let's get that out there, okay? They have a reason, they have a purpose, but you need to be able to buy what you want and what works for your use case. And for a huge majority of America, they still don't make sense. For those of you that do, great. They're a great option. So anyway, hey, coming up after the break, we're talking to a Skyline GTR owner who had his car stolen and then got it back. He's here joining me on the show after the break. You're listening to Automotive ADHD. Don't go anywhere.
"'Twas the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of turbos danced in their heads. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. When what to my wondering eyes did appear but a Mark IV Supra with boost to hear, and a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment he must be St. Nick. And then in a twinkling I heard the tires screech, the prancing and pawing of each horsepower. Down the track St. Nicholas came with a bound, a bundle of parts he had flung on his back. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings with speed parts and more, for the children would not have to return the core. He sprang to his Supra with tires to roast, and down the track he went making the most. With 40 pounds of boost on tap he tore, knowing the children would soon have more. Saying Merry Christmas from the Automotive ADHD podcast. Ho, ho, horsepower.
He's the nut behind the wheel and behind the mic. This is Automotive ADHD with Matt West.
Colorado this holiday season. 11 News' Grace Kramer brings us this story.
It hasn't been wrecked and it hasn't been stripped for parts. And I honestly feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the whole city.
Thomas Bristol was not feeling like the luckiest guy earlier this week when he learned that his rare and very unique 1993 Nissan Skyline GTR was stolen from his home in Denver.
And that story, by the way, has a happy ending. And in just a second here, I'm going to talk to the owner of that very car about what happened. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about these car theft stats. And by the way, if you listen to this show, if you've listened to it for any length of time, you know that I talk about car theft pretty often, actually. And I was even a victim of car theft about 2 years ago when my cherished 1977 AMC Hornet was stolen in the night. And my next guest, by the way, his car's probably a little nicer than that crusty old Hornet. But Colorado is the mecca of car theft. And you would never think of that. You would think, oh, it's got to be New York or, oh, maybe California, whatever. You're thinking it's another place, but it's not. It is Colorado, according to the most recent FBI crime data. And that's we have 51.43. You can't have a whole vehicle there, but roughly on average, 51 vehicles stolen per 100,000 citizens. And Colorado, we're right there. We're right there at the top of that. We are. Even when you look at a map of where car theft is in this country, you see Colorado as the hot spot. And I'll roll some of that here if you're watching on the video version of this show. Of course, you can catch this on the radio, AM 1460 The Answer, as well as AM 1400 KRLN and 91.7 KLZR. But you can also find it online, YouTube, Spotify, wherever fine shows in this one are downloaded, and you'll see that in the video. So I do want to talk to my next guest here, though. His name is Tommy Bristol. He's the owner of an R32 Skyline GTR. Tommy, welcome to Automotive ADHD.
Hey there. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so, okay, we heard at the top of the segment a little bit about what happened. We have a little bit of context right now, but before we talk about your car, before we talk about it getting stolen, give me just a little bit of your background. Introduce yourself to the listeners.
Yeah, hi. I've lived in Colorado my whole life. I live in Denver. I'm 40 years old and about I've always been into cars my whole life, but a little while ago I got a raise at a job and I was able to kind of buy a car I wanted, and I bought the first car I ever wanted that I had ever dreamed of, and it was actually a Honda S2000, and that kind of started me scratching an itch of buying cars that I've always kind of wanted, you know, and kind of pushing my paycheck to the limits when I could and when I could pay off cars and all of that. So I've always been into cars, and I bought the S2000 as my first, dream car. And then at some point in 2017, I decided, hey, what is it like to import a car? What is it like to get something really rare, really unique? What would that take? And I saw that R34s were legal and, relatively affordable at the time. So I decided to import one there. So I've always been into cars, and sometimes I've had too many, and recently I had one fewer against my will. So,
oh man. Well, I can, as a one S2000 owner to another as well, I can attest to the financially irresponsible decisions that we we partake in at times, and that's part of why this show's called Automotive ADHD, by the way. So I think you'll fit in around here. I think you'll fit in.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Tommy, tell me a little bit, about the car itself. What was that process like, importing it? What modifications did you do to the car? And maybe why do you think it caught the eye of the thieves?
Yeah, so Yeah, back in 2017, it was just kind of on a whim, you know. I had just paid off a car, and I kind of had a little bit of a car payment room in my budget, and I was like, what, can I do something really unique with this money in my budget, you know? A normal person would probably save it or, you know, buy something practical, but I wanted to buy another car. And I looked, and I found that you can import these cars. I found a website that has, they showed the stock from used cars in Japan, and they had a special section for cars that were legal to import to the U.S. I clicked on it, and I saw some Skylines in there, and I was like, I can maybe afford one of these. At the time, it was running around $20,000. So that was, I mean, it's not like a small amount of money, but broken into some payments, I was like, I could probably afford that. And I kind of started on this journey, and it took probably a solid 6 months of just logistics and paperwork and calling companies and all of these other things just to try to get that on a boat and then off a boat in California. And then I flew out to California, picked up the car, and drove it back with a lot of adventures along the way, lots of issues and discovering what it's like to own a 25-year-old Japanese rare car in the U.S. And it's been an adventure ever since. This is only an additional part of that story.
Yeah, and you are absolutely a brave man, by the way, for importing a car like that and then driving it back to Colorado. Just saying, that's a lot of faith in how that car arrived there at the shipyards. I've bought a car sight unseen at an auction, at least here in the U.S., and I'll tell you, you think, all right, yeah, the pictures are good, but you never really know what you're getting into, right?
Yeah, you really do discover a lot about the car on the way. I got extremely lucky. There were only a few issues. Of course, at the time, they felt like big disasters, and I didn't know what to expect. But, yeah, as far as the car itself, so it's a 1993. It's actually close to the end of the model run of the R34s, of the R32s. So it's got a lot of little improvements. There's not the same oil pump issues that a lot of the R32s have. I didn't really do any major modifications. I replaced all of the suspension, wheels, and tires. That's the major piece I did when I got it. It already had boost restrictor removed, an aftermarket exhaust, and by aftermarket, it was actually a Nismo exhaust. And that's about it, right? I decided to get an auction inspection report done. In Japan, they do very meticulous auction inspections. And it turns out that it had one door panel replaced in its life. So that means it was a poor grade in Japan because any body panel repair is, you know, a repaired vehicle. But it's also had an R34 engine block swapped into it.
Really?
It's using all the R32 internals and R32 turbo, but the block itself is an R34 block, so that's very interesting.
That is, and I suppose it's RB26 and another RB26, but just a later one, right?
Yeah, exactly. But all the other components, like the head and the turbos, they're all normal R32 stuff. And it came to me with probably around 67,000 miles on it. 1993 with 67,000 miles on the chassis, and probably around 67,000 on the engine, maybe a little more or less, because in Japan, once you hit around that 100,000 kilometer mark, taxes go up pretty steeply, and people usually just either get rid of the car or swap in a new engine. So,
yep, I can attest to that. Anytime you import a car or even an engine itself, I've imported engines at least, and you usually find 100,000 kilometers. That's always a number that keeps coming up there. So, but I think, Tommy, and I think, you know, what's interesting about this, and we will carry this on here into the next segment, but what I think is interesting is, you know, you go through the effort, you go through the dedication to import a rare, unusual, interesting car from Japan, all of the hoops to go through to make that happen, only for some guy in the night to just think he's more entitled to it than you.
Yeah, it feels like quite a violation, actually. It's something that I don't think compares to any other crime that is nonviolent, right? Those types of burglaries and taking something so precious from you, it really is as close to being assaulted as I think you can get without actually having violence committed against you personally.
Yeah.
And the whole time it was gone, I was having all of these just thoughts and fears of what could be happening to my car. I felt like Pee Wee Herman.
Yeah.
For his bicycle, you know what I mean?
Yeah, Tommy, hold that thought for just a second. Let's carry this on after the break. You're listening to Automotive ADHD.
Colorado Springs' #1 car show by default. This is Automotive ADHD.
And you know, if you listen to this show, that you can send your car sounds in for a chance to have them featured right here on the air. And you also have a chance to win some free stuff when you do that. The Automotive ADHD key tag, as well as the Automotive ADHD as heard on the Automotive ADHD sticker, and a parts store gift certificate. All of that could be yours. Remember to send those car sounds into the show, facebook.com/Automotive ADHD. Those car sounds, by the way, were sent by Tom. That was a Cadillac Escalade with a 6.2-liter supercharged V8. So again, facebook.com/Automotive ADHD. While you're there, like the page as well. Now, if you were joining us before the break, I've got Tommy Bristol on the line. He is the owner of a R32 Nissan Skyline GTR, and his Skyline made some headlines here for getting stolen, but then also getting recovered in a way that I think it was probably the fact that it was recovered at all is spectacular. But through social media, Tommy, you were able to have that car at least returned to you, or you're waiting for it to get it back right now, but we'll get into that, right?
Yeah. It's actually something I never expected to happen, and something that almost didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the morning it was stolen. It was stolen at like 3 a.m, and my neighbors came to me around 4 and said, "Hey, Tommy, we heard this huge crash. A man drove another car through the garage door of the building, smashed the garage door off the building completely just to steal your car, and it's gone." And I was devastated and like heartbroken. And toward little later in the day, once the sun started coming up, a friend of mine who I told about it said, "Hey, you need to announce this. You need to post this. There are Colorado stolen car groups on Facebook. There are car spotter groups. There's cars and coffee groups. Everyone knows, right? You need to at least let people know the car. You know, the car's important. Let them know. Maybe that some of them can see it." And I said, "No, I don't use Facebook. I don't really want to." She said, "Send me the pictures. Send me the story. I'll do it." So she posted for me on the Colorado Cars and Coffee and a couple others groups. And that started to get attention almost immediately. Almost immediately, people were posting pictures of my car. They had seen a Skyline driving south on I-25. They pulled out their phones to take a picture of the Skyline. People don't see those very often. And then they maybe got home or got to work and saw the post on the Facebook group and said, "Hey, I just saw that car and I took pictures. And it's going south, going this way. I saw it passing Castle Rock. I saw it at the Briar Gate exit. I saw it here, So and almost immediately, the internet was on top of locating my car.
Wow.
Within hours.
And so you were almost getting like real-time updates from people on the pages, the car spotters pages, the Cars and Coffee pages, right?
Yeah, almost immediately. And very regularly, people were posting, like, "Oh, I saw that Skyline." And there were a lot of pictures and videos. To this day, if you look at those posts on those groups, you can scroll through and see people taking live video of the car. They drove past it. They recorded a Skyline. Early on, people were just taking pictures of a Skyline they thought was cool, and then they realized it had been stolen.
Mm-hmm.
And later on, we had people actively searching the city, driving around, looking for the car. It had been reported in a few places regularly, right? Like a few times in the same places. So at one point, I was kind of fed up with the lack of movement, and I didn't feel like the police were able to kind of take action the way I wanted to. So I drove down to the Springs myself. I live in Denver, and I said, "I don't care. I'm going to go drive down there. I'm going to go to these like 4 places that it's been reported multiple times." And I drove myself down there. I didn't know the city, so I had to kind of learn as I go. But at one point, I even saw my own car driving north on Powers Boulevard, I think. And I was like, there's no way I just saw my car. And I tried to make a U-turn. I tried to follow him, but traffic is terrible down there. I think you guys know. And
Yep.
I wasn't able to turn around, and I lost it. But I even saw the car myself. So,
Wow.
no, what do I do? How do I do this? So, yeah, it's been crazy, and the internet totally helped out with that.
That is incredible. And to think that having your car stolen and then going out and seeing it drive around. Now, you can't leave me hanging here. So what did you do after that? Like, how did you end up finding it? Did you end up confronting the guy? What happened with it?
So he's out there joyriding, of course, and I'm in my nightmares imagining him treating this car, chopping this car up, putting regular unleaded gas in it, all the sins that you would.
Right.
And I see the car, and I want nothing more than to jump the curb and go immediately speed after it and run every red light and slice through traffic. But I'm in a Lexus GX 470. I could maybe jump the curb, but I'm not slicing through traffic very much.
Mm-hmm.
And he was already had a head start. So almost as quick as I saw him, I lost him. And it was devastating. It was almost more difficult than if I never saw it at all, right?
Wow.
Because it was right there at my fingertips, and then he got away. So I drove on for a little while more. I was kind of defeated, and I left. I came home, got a bunch more tips on the Facebook groups, by the way. And I'm convinced that the Facebook groups and all of the attention online, word got to him eventually. And he started to see that there were photos of him driving my car. Like every 30 minutes, his location was being tracked, and he got sick of it or got afraid, and he decided to drive out of the city a little bit, drop the car off, and leave it. Because that night at 11:30, I got a call from the El Paso County Sheriff telling me they found the car in the Black Forest area, and it's being recovered.
Wow. I mean, I'm almost speechless. And so the fact is that social media contributed to him getting so much attention that he didn't want to have any part of it. That's your theory.
That's my theory.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because otherwise, I mean, he didn't strip the car. He didn't wreck the car. He joyrided around a little bit in it and then left it on the side of the road.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now, what's interesting to me, too, is looking back, to when it got stolen. I mean, it got stolen basically out of a secured kind of parking complex where you're at, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a secure building. It's not like it's the safest area in the world, but it's in an underground parking garage, the locked garage door,
mm-hmm.
and cameras watching the door and everything. He had to drive another stolen car through the garage door to punch the garage door open to get in to see it.
Yeah.
So at some point through scouting or otherwise, he knew there was a Skyline in that garage, and he wanted it so bad that he would literally dump another car and, commit all of this drama to it. I wish I had the security footage for the news when they aired the story, but it's pretty dramatic.
Yeah. And I mean, it just makes me wonder, like when someone does that and when maybe they scouted it out, maybe they saw the car on a Car Spotters page too. I don't know, but it makes it you were definitely, in that sense, targeted in that way. It wasn't just like, hey, I'm going to bust through this garage and see what I find. I mean, he knew it was in there.
No, for sure. There were reports of some of my neighbors scaring off people who were kind of snooping around the garage a few weeks ago. I was out of town,
mm-hmm.
and there were reports of them snooping around the garage and being very suspicious and running away when they saw one of the residents. So
wow.
I'm almost positive that was for my car. They were scouting and trying to find a way in, and they couldn't, so they just drove a car through the building.
Wow. Tommy Bristol is my guest. His Skyline was stolen, then recovered. Tommy, we've only got about 30 seconds left, but really quick, what's next now? What's on the horizon? When are you getting the car back? Have you had a chance to see it? What are the next steps looking like?
So, yeah, right now it's being held for evidence at an evidence lot. I need to wait for them to call me and let me know when they get, fingerprints and things like that out of the car.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll be able to go down and see how drivable it is. They said it's not wrecked and it looks okay, so I'm hoping I can drive it out of there. If not, I'll have it towed. And I just want to say thank you to everybody online that commented on the post and, gave some information and helped out. From beginning to end, it was about 44 hours.
Wow.
My car was stolen. and they recovered it 44 hours later. I'm nothing but grateful.
That is an incredible story. Tommy, thank you so much for joining me right here on the Automotive ADHD show. I am glad your car is at least on its way back. Let's remember to keep an eye on things. Watch out. Car thieves, man, there are so many of them out there. We got to be on the lookout. You're listening to Automotive ADHD.